Welcome into the Charm City Birdwatch Podcast. I'm your host, Jake McDonald, JMcDonald95, Charm City BW on Twitter, and CharmCityBirdwatch.com, and you're listening to this podcast on either iTunes or SoundCloud. The Ravens have underwent about 2 weeks of training camp and trouble of a lot of injuries, retirements, suspensions, but they're gonna suit up tonight and get ready to face the Washington Redskins in their first preseason game from M&T Bank Stadium in beautiful Baltimore, Maryland at 7:30 p.m. The guy I'm going to have on my podcast in a couple minutes, I've had him on before, and I've also had the pleasure of meeting him at Ravens training camp last year when I got to job shadow Brian Mink for the day. He works for the Ravens as well, a former member of the Baltimore Sun, now a Ravens columnist for the Ravens website, John Eisenberg, who not only is writing columns for the Ravens every week, but has also written 9 books in his life. And the latest book that he wrote was released on July 4th, available on Amazon on Kindle, and where most books are sold in the Maryland and the surrounding area, anywhere that sells sports books, you can probably find it. But if not, go to Amazon where you can get a hardcover copy, you get it for your Kindle electronically. Wherever it is, The Streak, Lou Gehrig, Cal Ripken Jr., and baseball's most historic record, of course, the famous Cal Ripken Jr. 2-1-3-1, where he broke the record for consecutive games played and went on to play 502 more games, definitely the most significant record in Baltimore sports history, and one of, if not the most impressive record in baseball history of all time. Never would be seen today, and certainly doubtful we will ever see it happen again. Here to break down not only this book that just came out about a month ago, but also the Ravens' current situation as they get set to get ready for the preseason tonight. Joining me now is John Eisenberg.
So joining me now, Ravens columnist and former Baltimore Sun sports writer John Eisenberg, also the author of The Streak, Lou Gehrig, Cal Ripken, and Great Baseball's most historic record. You can follow him on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. So John, I've heard, you go on a couple podcasts. I've heard you on a couple radio stations talk about this book and how long it took to do. Me growing up, I was born in 95, so I didn't get to really see the prime of Cal Ripken's career. I barely remember him playing as a kid. I've seen highlights of him, and my dad has shown me, countless books and magazines with, Cal Ripken, and I do have some apparel of him from way back in the day. So as a columnist, in Baltimore at this time, while all this was going on, him chasing the streak and, breaking the record, what was that like to be in the city at that time?
Well, it was an interesting time because the Orioles, of course, they were in the World Series in 1983, the second year of Cal's career, and then they entered, a long dry spell. And the Orioles, and then the Colts left, and the Orioles were all that was in town here in Baltimore, but yet they weren't very good. After many, many years of being great, they just weren't very good. 1988, they started the season with 21 straight losses. Just an epic thing. So this is for a decade, and the only thing they had going for them really was Cal. For a long time, Cal was an MVP in 1991. They had a horrible year that year, and so his streak, in many respects, was about the best thing going in sports in Baltimore for a long time. So I think that contributed to why it was such a big deal here. There was nothing else going on. This was before the Ravens were here, and the Orioles had not been in the playoffs in a long time. So Cal and his streak were pretty much the number one story here for a long time.
Now, going off of this book, what's it been? It was released on the 4th of July. Of course, this is your 9th book, correct? I saw on your website earlier around 9 books or so.
Yep, this is number 9.
So what's the reaction been, for the book, not only just in Baltimore, first of all, but in the baseball world overall, seeing the reaction to this piece that you put together?
A really, really good reaction. I'm very gratified by it. As an author, I spent a long time in my office with the door closed, basically huddling in the dark, trying to shape this thing. It took me 4.5 years to get it done. So when you throw it out on the public realm, you don't know how people are going to react. You pretty much hold your breath, but it's been a really gratifying, warm reaction. Great reviews in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. Any author would give anything for that, so that's just lovely. and not a lot of nice things said in a lot of places. So it's been a great reaction. I can't really, honestly, I can't think of a book I've written that's had just sort of a better initial reaction. So I'm really pleased about it.
What was it like, interviewing Cal, and how much work did you have to do with him around this book?
Well, Cal, I knew Cal. I covered Cal. When I was as you mentioned, I was a columnist at the Baltimore Sun for many years, so I was in an opinion-making position. So, I took a lot of opinions on Cal. Cal didn't always like them, but he was a professional, and we never really had a bad time together. And here we are all these years later. He was more than willing to participate in this project. I came to him, and it's not like we're close or anything, but I said, look, I want to write this book. I'm going to examine your streak. I'm going to examine Gehrig's streak. I'm going to tell the history of this record and really just turn this achievement of yours over every way, like a Rubik's Cube almost, and just examine it. And he said, cool. And so we sat down a couple times in his office, had long sessions. He really enjoyed it. He even called me one day. He was on a bike ride. He called me one day. This was right near the end of us finishing the manuscript, and we had been talking about how there are no more consecutive game streaks in baseball. It has really come to an end. Baseball has changed a lot since he left. And it's just what he did is not emphasized anymore. And he called me with some ideas. He said, look, why don't you go find out what happened, what Joe Madden did with Evan Longoria in Tampa in 2010. Go look that up, and you'll see that's sort of the death knell of consecutive game streaks. So, he was enthusiastic enough to just call me out of the blue and offer some suggestions. So I really appreciate it.
And as you're, putting this piece together, what were, some of the key challenges you faced putting it together, like the hardest parts that you had?
The hardest part, without a doubt, was the structure. I did a lot of research, talked to a ton of people, went to the Hall of Fame, where they have a great research library, studied up on Gehrig. There's tremendous material there, including his widow's scrapbooks, these giant scrapbooks that Eleanor Gehrig put together as her husband was a star and then got sick and died. Very, very poignant research material, needless to say. So I had this great material, but then it was like, well, how am I going to tell this story? Am I going to start at the beginning of baseball and explain how consecutive game streaks came to be? Or what am I going to do? So I really went through some trial and error on that, to be honest with you. And I'm working with an editor, and she's a hockey mom who lives in Boston, a real good editor, and had a lot of opinions. And so I went back with a lot of different structures. I finally settled on the right one. With her help, I will be the first one to say, sort of toggling back and forth between Cal's story and Gehrig's story, and then these other Iron Men who have done things along the way, and the various parts of the sort of the side stories that come up, about luck and statistics and the many other things that this record touches on. So it was very difficult to come up with a structure, but I finally did.
With this book out now, are there any other projects in the works in the future?
There are. I am, as I promote this book, I'm in the final stages of writing another one, finishing another manuscript. The book will be out, I'd say, a year from now. I'm going back to football, and I have written a book, manuscript, on the early days of the NFL, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, telling the story through the lens of the 5 owners who basically held the league together when it was a minor sport and not popular at all and barely surviving. How did they do that, and what did they do to set up the NFL for success later on? It's these 5 guys. It's some famous names: George Halas, the original Mara, the Mara still own the Giants. The original Rooney, Art Rooney, who started the Pittsburgh Steelers. George Preston Marshall, who founded the Redskins, is, of course, in the eye of the storm these days, because of the nickname. And then Bert Bell, who founded the Philadelphia Eagles. So 5 basic founders. And they're all real characters, and I've had, honestly, a great time researching and telling this story.
With the Hall of Fame occurring last weekend, I didn't really see as much advertising for it. I don't know if it's just because I don't watch as much TV as I used to, but that occurred over last weekend, and I know Baltimore media, historians and fans have been clamoring for Art Modell, who, when the Ravens came to Baltimore, I was 1 year old, and I didn't get to remember a lot of Art Modell. Do you think he'll get in the Hall of Fame one day?
Nope, I do not think he will get in. I think that ship has sailed, as a matter of fact. Art was a real pioneer. You go back to the early 60s. I mean, these guys I'm writing about, they're well before Art. But, he had a lot to do with some important stuff, the history of television in the NFL, really integral stuff. But when he moved that franchise, it just rubbed some people the wrong way. And, for better or for worse, even though he had his reasoning. And, he's the guy that moved the Browns out of Cleveland, and it upset some people. And I just don't think, it's not no one says life is fair, right? And I just don't think it's ever going to happen.
It's just, I'm in a weird position because I never got to grow up being, around when the Colts moved. And, seeing all the NFL teams relocating now, I can't even imagine what that was like to experience it here. I don't have an emotional connection to Art Modell because I didn't grow up in that era, but from what, my father's told me, from what I've heard from, Baltimore media, for what he did to the game, it certainly sounds like he has a case to be in the Hall of Fame. But I agree with what you're saying at the same time, when he, not necessarily that it's a bad thing to move the franchise. I think, in a way it had to happen. But that might be the reason why he doesn't get in, and for better or for worse, it's just maybe something that Baltimore is going to have to live with in the future.
I believe they will. Baltimore's just going to have to live with it. I mean, as I said, life's not always fair, and Art, some situations just for whatever reason stand out to people and just rub people the wrong way. Listen, Art, Al Davis moved the Raiders all over the place. And, there's all sorts of people that have moved teams. But this one in particular just seemed to rub people the wrong way. And so as a result, it sort of puts a cloud over everything else he did, which is not really fair. Some really key stuff in the relationship between football and television, which is, just integral to the NFL success. So, but anyway, I mean, that's just what it is, and it's too bad that is the way it is.
Well, having John Eisenberg, Baltimore Ravens columnist again, Be More Eisenberg on Twitter, having him on the podcast tonight to talk about his new book that just came out. We got a big, lengthy discussion about that. But I would be mistaken if I didn't ask Mr. Eisenberg about his opinion about the Baltimore Ravens as they get ready to face the Washington Redskins on Thursday at M&T Bank Stadium. So, it's well documented, everything that's happened the past 2 weeks. I'm not going to get into all the injuries because we already know what they are. The whole Kaepernick situation happened. But for a little clarity on Flacco, not really clear. We've heard at first 3 to 6 weeks, then it was turned into maybe 1 week. I'm still not clear. I mean, I could, be missing something, but it's not structural. It's just, is it a muscular thing, or is it just something that he tweaked while he was working out? Like, what exactly, as far as what the injury he's dealing with actually is?
Well, I mean, I've heard a number of things, and it's really hard to know exactly what the truth is. I mean, I think it's almost better to go with what it isn't. And as you said, it is not structural. I am hearing that is the fact. It is not a structural injury. It is maybe something that, will be a little bit of a setback, or has been a little bit of a setback, but not particularly serious. So, something that he can play with. And so I don't know. That's the best I've got. It just doesn't sound serious to me. And so I think maybe the whole Kaepernick thing started because backs can be funny. If anyone who's ever had a back injury knows, they're hard to predict. And so I think they had an idea of what was going on, but they weren't sure. So they sort of thought about, well, maybe we need to, come up with something. But I think as time goes on, I think Flacco's going to be the quarterback this year, and it'll be something that we talk about in the summer. But the fact that he was injured, but I don't think it's that serious.
You wrote a piece lately about the Ravens possibly making more additions. They do have the least amount of salary cap space remaining in the NFL after signing Austin Howard last Friday. Do you think I mean, it's kind of hard to get a read on them because of the situation that they're in. But from what you were saying in your article, it sounds like even though they have no money to spend, they could do some maneuvering here, maybe bring in somebody else to reassure up the offensive line. So, on the seesaw here, are you leaning more towards they are going to make another move or not?
Yeah, I think they might. I mean, that's what I said in the piece, and I think it's possible. I mean, it depends on who gets cut and who's out there. They're certainly through getting receivers. They don't need any more receivers. The three positions I said were, center. I mean, who knows? I mean, center is definitely a position where they've given the job basically to Ryan Jensen. Let's see what happens, but they're not 100% sure about him yet. So that one remains to be seen. Running back is the one where I really think. And that's sort of flying under the radar. They have their starter there. They've got some Buck Allen's look good in training camp. But under the radar, they've said all along, we would love to find somebody else to throw into the mix. I mean, and they have Danny Woodhead. They got a lot going on. But if somebody gets cut, that's the one where they might really make a jump. And and slot corner would be the other one where they've had some injuries. But if somebody falls through the net and is there, they'll make a move. They might have to cut a veteran. They might have to restructure a contract. But, Ozzie Newsome, the GM, is famous for saying, if there's somebody there, we want him. We will find a way. So if the right player is there, they'll jump on it.
I want to get your opinion going back to the injury thing real quick. We know some of these are season ending. We know some of them are going to be out long term, some of them not so long term like Flacco. But it really seems like since the 2012 season when they won the Super Bowl, I mean, they even dealt with a lot of injuries that year with Suggs and Ray Lewis going down at certain times. But really, they kind of caught a break in the 2014 season, even though Jimmy Smith went down. But they've lost Pitta. They've lost basically everybody in 2015, and it appears that they're dealing with something very similar this year. I know that they've tweaked their offseason program the past couple of years, but is it something that they're doing internally that's causing all this, or is it just bad luck?
Boy, it's a great question. And because they have asked that question, and tweak is not the word. I mean, they've changed things. They brought in a recovery coach. I mean, there's a lot of science right now when it comes to physicality in pro football, injuries, getting guys in shape and then keeping them in shape, and then performance and recovery. They have a performance and recovery trainer. So, there's a lot of science going to it, and they like to think that they're on the cutting edge. And, I don't know that they're doing things a whole lot differently than anyone else. So I guess you have to attribute it mostly to bad luck. Certainly every injury is different. I mean, when Tavon Young tears up his knee, in shorts on a spring practice, that's bad luck. I mean, that's all you can say there. Take a wrong step. And basically the same thing happened to Crockett Gilmore in training camp. So, but, Nico Saragusa, the rookie, I mean, he's in a full contact practice. Somebody rolls up on his knee. That's a whole different story. That's he was in harm's way there. So there's no, they're all different, but there's not a common denominator other than the fact that it's been going on too long. I would agree with you. And it's a real problem. And they've already changed their routines. I don't know if they can keep changing it. They just got to hope for a little better luck, I think.
The defense, the Ravens really added via free agency and in the draft, spent, three, or it was either 3 or 4 of their first draft picks it was the first 4 draft picks on defense. Had a little trouble remembering there, but watching the defense in camp, it's clear that they've really manhandled the offense. It's been a little better recently, according to reports that I've read. But just from watching from afar, all the young guys they have on defense, especially up front, how does the unit look?
Well, it looks pretty good. I mean, the defense definitely, they've remade it in many respects. It is a younger, quicker, faster unit, and it is much, much deeper on the back end. That to me, that's where it all starts. I mean, they've got to have a new defensive front, that's for sure. Other than Brandon Williams, some of the new players, but those are positions where they've invested some draft picks, and they always have players like that on hand. I mean, Michael Pierce is going to step in. I think Brent Urban is going to start, and they've got 2 or 3, 4 other guys that they can mix in to those positions. These are young, hungry guys. So I think there's a lot to like up front. I mean, they don't have as much experience, and maybe there'll be some growing pains a little bit up front. But I think generally speaking, it's pretty agile and a promising group. The linebackers, of course, the pass rush is an area where they really fell off last year, and they've invested some capital in that with some draft picks the last couple of years. And it's going to be very interesting to see how those guys, there's just a slew of them. And certainly just to name one, Tim Williams, a rookie this year, third-round draft pick. He's looked really good in camp. I mean, he may just be a pure pass rusher. He slipped because of personal reasons, and he might be one of the steals of the draft. I don't know that he's a three-down player, but he's going to be pretty tough on third down. And so, they're hoping one or more of these young guys will step forward and mix with Terrell Suggs and give him a good pass rush. And really the strength of the defense, I think, now is the back end, where they're just really deep at cornerback. Jimmy Smith, Brandon Carr, Marlon Humphrey, first-round pick. He looks great. He's been injured a little bit lately, so he's been off the field. Before then, I mean, they love him. The coaches just love him. He's big, rangy, fast, tough kid. So that's going to be good. And then the safeties, they had one of the best tandems going, with Eric Weddle and Tony Jefferson. So I think that the Ravens went into this whole offseason saying, last year we blew some games late. Last year wasn't a great year, but it might have been better than it looked if we hadn't blown a couple games that went back and forth. The Giants, the Steelers. So their real goal this year is not to blow those games with leaky pass defense late in the game. And, I would say they're well on their way to doing that.
We're about to wrap things up with Baltimore Ravens columnist John Eisenberg. Again, Be More Eisenberg on Twitter, and the author of The Streak, Lou Gehrig, Ripken Jr., and baseball's most historic record that just hit Amazon.com and other bookstores a little over a month ago. One more quick question for you. I have a little bit of a personal connection with Keenan Reynolds. I actually got to meet him last year. He came to one of the games for the Independent League baseball team that I worked for last summer in the baseball information aspect. How's he look? I know, he had a rough transition last year adjusting to the NFL and switching positions, but second training camp, had the big practice at Navy the other night. So how's he figuring into the return game?
Well, it's hard to say. He's one of a cast of characters that are there. He looks good. Keenan is vastly improved. I mean, last year he was a guy transitioning to receiver. This year he is a receiver. That's as pure as I can put it. So, he's making a lot more plays. And, it's crowded there. It's tough. I mean, to be very honest with you, his chances he's got to be something of a long shot to make the team at this point. There are positions to be won there. There are jobs available at receiver if you stand out. But, the Ravens, this year they brought in a couple of undrafted free agents that are lighting it up. And they are fast playmakers that get deep. And so he's battling that as well as the odds of making it. So I don't know. They love Keenan. I mean, nobody works harder, and he's a playmaker. And they put the ball in his hand, and as a return guy, he's going to get some chances in these preseason games. But he's got to make something happen in these games. He's got to show something because, it's one thing to be really good in practice, another thing in the game. They'd love to see something like that happen and make it a more difficult choice for them. Right now he needs something to happen. He's played well, but the time when the lights come on, it's time to shine.
And that will be the case for many players tomorrow as the Baltimore Ravens take on the Washington Redskins at M&T Bank Stadium at 7:30 on Thursday night. Once again, Ravens columnist John Eisenberg joining me, the author of his new book that came out, which you can buy on iTunes and on Amazon.com on Kindle, and it can be found at bookstores near you. John, I want to thank you again for joining me again tonight. And if you see Jerry, Pete, or Keith out at the practice fields, tell them that I said hi to them this time via podcast when I talk to you.
I'll be sure and do that. I enjoyed it. Good to be with you.